When most of us think post-traumatic stress disorder, we think of soldiers overseas. But if you're the victim of a surprise assault or a first responder to homicide, a fire, or any tragic event, you might suffer from PTSD. The key is dealing with it head on. Beware what happens when you don't. Police officer Brian Knowler suffered 8 years of nightmares and the beginning of the end of his marriage before he woke up.
The incident that triggered all this was a collision I responded to in 2004. And then, things built up for years, and I never dealt with them properly. And in the collision, it was the person who died was a good friend of mine from university. And he died basically as I was doing CPR and first aid. And I never processed it properly. I never did a debriefing. I never went and talked to a counselor, therapist, nothing. I just thought, no, it's part of the job. Right away, I was having nightmares. I wasn't sleeping a full night. I would, close my eyes and I could, right back at that. So, right back into the scene. So I guess those would be flashbacks.
Brian used to come home from work and go into the basement. So he was really absent from our family. We have 2 young boys. And I really did feel like a single mom most days. I was making decisions on my own. Meanwhile, my husband's in the basement.
It's very hard, again, as someone in uniform to go, I have a problem. I need help, when my job is to be the helper. So if I need help, well then what good am I in my job? So flash forward to 2012, and we were having, this super serious talk, probably the most serious talk we ever had in our marriage. And as we were talking, I was hearing what she was saying, but in my mind I was seeing my friend who had died, and then, his van. And I opened my mouth to answer, and I couldn't. And then I went to do it again, and it was like a dam breaking, and tears and sobbing, and I couldn't even talk.
And then he started telling me about this story that I'd never heard before. The story of this accident that scene he went to. It happened the year our son was born, who is now 8 years old. And I thought, how did I not know that?
And that was when she basically said, okay, I'll support you. But that's when she said, I need to know that you're either going to get help for this, or you need to get out.
Get help or get out. Okay, please welcome Brian Fowler joins us in studio. Dr. Karyn Gordon is here as well. I love that you're both here because we want to talk a little bit about what PTSD is. We want to talk about your experiences, Brian, going through this with your whole family. Let's start with a definition, Karyn.
So PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. It can happen to anyone. It can happen to anyone. It can happen to children, mums, dads, and basically what it is a person when they either experience or witness some kind of trauma. So the trauma could be someone's actually has died or actually has gotten injured. We see it in wars. All these refugees that are coming over, a lot of them would have experienced this trauma. We see it a lot with people in terms of paramedics, police, journalists that are the first person on the site.
Yeah.
So it really will, and it can impact them. A lot of times people will have the symptoms right away or within 3 months, but it can be delayed.
Right.
So this is something that really can impact everyone.
For you, Brian, it was being the first responder on a scene, and it was your friend. Yep. It turned out to be someone you knew, and you lost this person. Yep. You went home that day, you didn't say anything. Over the years and the months and the days that went on, what did you use to numb the pain?
Well, I basically isolated myself from my wife and kids. I buried myself in work and seeking promotion and seeking opportunities, because it was easy to be at work where you're in control. Yeah. Alcohol, which is pretty common among not just first responders, but anybody dealing with PTSD. Video games, internet, TV, basically anything that would kind of make you numb. Yes. Basically, just to get away from the images and the flashbacks and everything else that was going on at the time.
So I want to talk about those symptoms a little bit more. How might a person feel that's going through PTSD?
They're
Karyn?
going to feel numb. They're going to feel sometimes guilt, frustration, edgy. I don't actually do the diagnosis or assessment myself. I have colleagues that do that, but they will refer people to me, and so I love working with people of all types, all ages, and I'm so incredibly thankful for Brian to have the courage, to share this story, because there's so many people that are suffering that think, I can't get out, it's not going to get any better, and they have the flashbacks and the nightmares and the forgetfulness, and the biggest thing is how it will impact a person, their work performance, they're forgetful, and then how that impacts their marriage.
Right.
It will, everything kind of starts deteriorating.
Yes.
And there's a ripple effect if a person does not get help.
So anyone out there who's holding it down, you've got the kids, you've got a spouse, and you're just getting through every day. You knew things had changed for you, but you didn't want to talk to Kathy about it. And why was that? What was it that was stopping you from just saying, I'm having nightmares, I can't sleep, I'm stressed out, I'm traumatized?
Well, it's funny you say stress, because part of it was we just thought, oh, life stress. I mean, I had a job where I was responsible for, about 100 officers. Kathy was a school principal. We had 2 small kids. We just thought, okay, that's life stress. Pride, ego. You're the helper. You don't get helped, right? And that clearly did not do anything for me in this case. And part of it was I just thought I can get through this on my own. Kathy has enough on her plate, and 8 years proved me way wrong.
Why at that moment, 8 years later, did you decide to say something?
Like I said in the piece, it was just like a dam breaking, and everything just kind of bubbled up, and it was literally a crash. I mean, emotional, physical, psychological. I felt like a dish rag somebody had wrung out, and I thought, well, now's my chance. Now, if it's ever going to come out, it's at this juncture when she's basically ready to kick me out, right? Yeah. And I don't blame her. I mean, I should be homeless living in Northern Ontario somewhere in a fridge box. So the fact that I'm not, and like Kathy said in the piece, it was get help or get out. And I knew that was my watershed moment. It was either do something or do nothing.
Okay, so let's talk about solutions, because you've obviously, you're walking this walk now. You've gotten the help, which is really brave. Karyn, what are the sorts of things you can do when you get to that point? Hopefully you don't have to get to that point to start changing things, but what do you look for?
So it's a couple things. Number one, it's really important to realize that just because someone has experienced or witnessed trauma doesn't necessarily mean it's going to cause PTSD. There's a number of variables that actually are going to impact it. One of the biggest things is when we experience trauma, we have to talk it out. It's kind of like what he was talking. Think about our emotional system. We've done different shows on emotions and how it works. All those emotions that a person feels, they're inside. And if they don't have a way out, they're going to come out in different ways. They're going to come out in nightmares. They're going to come out in edginess. It's going to try to make its way out, but in ways that really a person feels like they have lost control. So number one, the biggest thing is if somebody has experienced any of these kind of symptoms that we've talked about, go see your family doctor. They may refer you to somebody to get assessed. They may not. But that really should be the first step. Because it has a physical impact in terms of how it's going to affect a person. That should be kind of the first step. And then to look at in terms of counseling. Counseling, group therapy. CAMH has got some great references on their website in terms of extra resources as well. But the most important thing is as long as a person gets help and they start talking, talking it out, processing, talking about not only for him, but also talking about how it actually impacts Kathy, because there's a ripple effect, right? So you have the one person where they're trying to process it, but you want to also make sure that the spouse is going to be willing to hear it and to receive it, because otherwise what happens is a person finally has the courage to talk it out, and if that spouse is not ready to hear it, then that can just shut it right off. And so really kind of equipping both people is actually very important.
Yeah, well, they did all the right things, which is amazing. So Brian Knowler has actually become a bit of a voice for PTSD. I love that you've done this. You've written a book on your experience with PTSD. It's called On the Other Side of Broken, One Cop's Battle with the Demons of Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder.